Welcome to the Darkstream. Vox Day, voxday.blogspot.com. Welcome to the reprehensibles, to the unauthorized, to the VFM, to the Dread Ilk, and of course, to the Bears. So here we are again, repeating something that I have been saying pretty regularly since 2015 or so. Now, I don't know why it's so hard to convince people that talking to the media is not a good idea, but it seems like everybody thinks that they're Milo. I have to warn you that we have a bit of a storm coming in, and so I have some rather nervous puppies, and you may hear them. You may hear them from time to time. So, anyhow, I was looking. I was doing my usual round of reading things and so forth, and I had to kind of laugh when I was sent a couple links by a couple different people of the same thing. And, the reason I paid attention to it is because Jared Taylor happens to be one of the people that I am not infrequently asked about. And so, Mazzy, go lay down. Go lay down. He's eyeing my couch, which he knows he's not allowed on. And so the thing is that the whole focus on the media is so 1980s. We don't need the media anymore. It's irrelevant. That's the thing that's so crazy to me about the way that people keep sticking their hand into the grinder time and time and time again. And look, I'm just as guilty as anybody else of thinking that, well, I know that I can, I'm smart enough and I'm clever enough, and I know that I can avoid crucifying myself, and I can, but here's the point, is that it doesn't work, because even if you are capable of holding your own, you know what they do? They just don't run it. So what you're doing is you're putting yourself in a position of you lose if you fail, and you don't win even if you win. John Yossarian makes a good point too. Cernovich noted that he didn't even sell a single book after appearing on Fox or CNN. You know how many he sold after he appeared on a Darkstream with me? He sold something like 300. That's how much more important these kind of channels are. This is, of course, why they're trying to deplatform and shadow ban and all those sorts of things, because they are they're so effective. This is why unauthorized TV is so effective. Even with what we're doing here, because of the occasional drop frames, you will get a better experience watching this recording, because I'm recording this as well as streaming it live. And I upload the recorded version to unauthorized, whereas the stream version goes on YouTube. And so when there's any frames dropped and so forth, it's only going to be dropped from the YouTube one. John Delarose confirms he went on OANN, which is friendly media, didn't sell a single book. Now, obviously, there are occasionally exceptions. You know, InfoWars sells a lot of alt hero comics. I mean, and by a lot, I mean, hundreds at a shot. And so, there's always exceptions. But, one of the reasons why I speak in determinatives rather than moderating my approach is because everybody fails to listen to the rule. Everybody seems to think that they are the exception. And it's just not true. Even the exceptions, even the exceptional, like Milo. Milo is faster on his feet and more verbally quick-witted than anyone I've ever met. And even he will find himself getting pinned down occasionally, which is, of course, what happened after that whole Bill Maher affair. And so what Owen Martin means by OODA tactics is he's talking about tactics that were developed from air strategy. It's the known as the OODA loop, which is essentially about making your observations and reacting to them faster than the other side, which allows you to continually stay ahead of them. There are those who will argue that it's not applicable, but Colonel Boyd's air combat concepts are actually fairly relevant to some of the stuff that we're talking about here. A Legionnaire Bear says, Vox, please consider doing a Voxiversity on the role of fathers for young men. Just saw an old friend. Many of my old friends are hooked on heroin. One commonality is that there's no father in the home. Very sad. Yeah, that's, this whole heroin thing is something that I can't relate to. Heroin was something that homeless people in the inner city did, not people out in the suburbs in the country. So I'm not even going to, I've been out of the States for a long time. I'm not even going to pretend to try to understand or explain it. But if talking about the importance of fathers and father figures can help combat that in some way, I'll definitely be willing to do that. I really need to get on those Voxiversities recordings. You'll understand later this week why I have been less than optimally productive on the comic and book and Voxiversity fronts. I can just about confirm that I'm going to be making some very big announcements this week. And those of you who, those Arcaven backers who are involved, you all know what I'm talking about, and you'll be, we'll be getting in touch with you soon. No, this doesn't have anything to do with Indiegogo. Nothing to do with Indiegogo at all. That's the other thing that's been keeping me very busy. And I'm pleased to see that lots of backers have been bouncing the rubble. I expect that we're going to see more people doing so every week. And now that we know, now that we have confirmation that Indiegogo is not in great shape financially, I think that we can be relatively confident that Either we're going to be reaching some kind of accommodation relatively soon, or we're going to have a nice silver skull mounted on the wall in the reasonably near future. Vinny asks, is Faith Goldie a Christian nationalist grifter? No, I don't believe so. I think that Faith is very serious about what she does. I would not confuse her with like Lauren Southern and grifters like that. Legionnaire Bear says, Vox, no pressure. You're the most productive person I've discovered and a huge influence. That will strike terror into hearts everywhere. Just would like to get your thoughts on fatherhood when you can get to it. Sure. Vox, what languages do you speak and why are none of them Russian? I'll answer the second question first because I've never had any reason to learn Russian. I learned German when I was starting in junior high, and I had the good fortune to have an absolutely excellent German teacher. To the point that my accent is good enough that people usually think I'm much closer to fluent than I am. If I'd kept it up at all, I would have been fluent for the last 20 years. One of my best friends with whom I was taking the course, he's perfectly fluent now because he kept it up, studied it in college, went over there a few times and so forth. I then learned Japanese in college. Got to the point where I would say that I was very comfortably conversational. Not fluent, but fully conversational. These days, I haven't used it in 30 years, so it's kind of funny. I don't tend to think of myself as speaking it at all. And yet when someone will say something to me in Japanese and I'm not thinking about it, I can often understand them and frequently even answer them. But only as long as I'm not thinking about it. And then I also speak Italian, obviously, and I've also learned some French. So, but my French is very, very bad. Did Trump use some of Scott Adams' persuasion stuff? No. Scott Adams' persuasion stuff is mostly utilized to persuade you that Scott Adams is a master persuader. I mean, it's nothing that he says is useful to anyone that I've ever seen. I actually think he's a remarkably good observer of the human condition. I think that his commentary on human behavior as seen in Dilbert is brilliant. So I have a lot of respect for him. But, he seems to be one of those guys who isn't content being really great at what he's really good at and wants to be taken more seriously. And, I think I can understand that. People don't take cartoonists seriously. They don't take comic book writers seriously, that sort of thing. So it's natural that you might want to be regarded as more of a serious intellectual or something. But, I take him much more seriously as a cartoonist than I do as any sort of rhetorical master. What direction is the left going in 2 years? Further down the road that they're on. If you've read my columns dating back to, I think, 2010, I've specifically talked about the way that the Democratic Party is becoming the not white party. And that's the direction they're heading. They're not there yet. You still have Creepy Joe and the little gay mayor and, the JFK wannabe. But even he has to speak Spanish in order to be in the mix, and he's not getting anywhere. So I think this is the second to last hurrah for white men in the Democratic presidential race. Nathan Danner says, Jared Taylor speaks both Japanese and French fluently. I don't care. People have said, what do you think of Jared Taylor before? My answer previously had always been, I don't know. I know nothing about him. Now, when people ask, I can say, well, I think that he's stupid, naive, and attention-seeking. You know, that's the sum of my knowledge about him. You know, I'm sure he's a perfectly lovely guy. He's probably a much nicer person than I am. I have no doubt about that at all. But, you know, you just can't do this kind of stuff if you want to be taken seriously. The media will never take you seriously because you are product to them. They have a pre-written story, and all they're doing is assembling the pieces. And so thinking that you're going to influence the story in some way is a category error. You're not. The story's already done. The story's already written. Either you play the role, or they find someone else to play the role, or if they can't find someone else to play the role at all, then they just throw the story out altogether. I've seen it happen many times when I've refused to play the role. You know, I get contacted literally every day for interviews. You know, we just really want to get the nationalist perspective. We'd love to get the experience, the perspective of the alt-right. We'd love to know what you know, give you your chance to tell your side of the story. You know, I don't need any chance to tell my side of the story. There's 20,000 blog posts on my blog. There's 702 people watching right now. 24 hours from now, 10,000 people will have seen this video. That's actually more than will actually read the story in the New York Times. You know, I mean, oh, we got a whiner here. You answer easy questions. Poet the answers for the more difficult. I don't even post the answer. I don't do what people tell me to do. So, you know, I strongly suggest that you not do that if you want to keep making comments here. Thoughts on Antifa using concrete milkshakes on people? Well, they're going to get themselves arrested soon, and people are going to be defending themselves legitimately very soon. So, this is funny. Save Western Civilizations now says, Jared Taylor is exposing the media. No, he's not. We all know what the media is. You know, that's like saying, I'm going to expose Hillary Clinton for being a woman. Everybody knows. He's not exposing the media. He's seeking attention. That's it. You know, that's why people contact me and they say, well, you know, I know it'd be best if I didn't talk to the media, but, you know, I have this opportunity because this radio station contacted me and they really want to know, you know, our side of the story. I think they're really interested. I mean, you know, they ask some smart questions and I really think it's a good opportunity to open some eyes. I always tell them, don't do it. And, you know, people are beginning to listen a little bit more. I would say maybe 3 times in 10 that they say, yeah, okay, you're probably right. 7 times out of 10, they'll say, well, you know, I think that this, I mean, I know you're probably right most of the time, but, you know, I think in this case it's different. And inevitably, they end up, you know, telling me something similar to what Jared Taylor was posting. Oh, they they selectively took a few of my words and made me look bad and made me look crazy. It's like, really? Imagine that, you know? And here's why I finally reached the conclusion that there's just no reason to do it whatsoever, that Stefan Molyneux was correct all along. And keep in mind, Stefan Molyneux is the one who really understood before any of us that you just have to build your own platform and completely ignore the media. And he's been very, very successful in doing that. And I have tremendous respect for what he's built on his own with Free Domain Radio. You know, and he and I talked about this, and you know, I had the more conventional perspective of, well, you know, any news is good news and that sort of thing. And he said, you know, no, maybe it used to be that way, but it's not that way anymore. And here's why. And let me explain. The media has now been weaponized. So, for example, when Amanda Robb from Rolling Stone contacted me and wanted to do a story about Castelli House, and you know, I got to give Space Bunny credit. She's like, "Don't talk to her. It's not going to work. You know, she's out. You know, to get you." And you know, I knew that there was an element of that, but I also know that Rolling Stone doesn't really do generic hit pieces. You know, they do. Right, they might do complete fiction, like the story, the ridiculous story about the non-rape at Dartmouth or wherever it was. But you know, they do tend to do in-depth, insightful stories. And so, and also the story wasn't about me, and it wasn't about the right wing, and it wasn't about nationalism, it wasn't about alt-right. It was about Castelli House. You know, what we were doing, how we had come out of nowhere, and you know, why our books were so well regarded. And so I thought, okay, you know, this isn't something about me, this isn't something about politics. You know, I have a responsibility as a, you know, editor at the publishing house to help sell the books, help sell the company, right? But what was interesting then is that first, she wasn't able to get anything useful out of me. Okay. So again, I'm not saying this as somebody who's incompetent and somebody who just, you know, got badly burned in a trap. I didn't get burned at all. You know, later in the subsequent hit piece that she did run on NPR, you know, she complained about the fact that she talked to me for 3 hours, and she was very frustrated because she couldn't get anything out of me, by which she meant I never gave her any disqualifying kill quote, right? But here's what happened, is that she then used that to try to interfere with what we were doing on Amazon. She actually contacted Amazon and tried to get us deplatformed on the basis of some of the comments that I had made to her. Now, again, I didn't give her anything useful enough, but if I had, she would have been taking them to Amazon. And then she also talked to other companies like Indiegogo. And then what they also do is they use whatever comments you make as reliable sources for Wikipedia. And Wikipedia then uses those comments to put statements about you in public, which then have a negative effect on you working with other companies. So we've talked to other crowdfunding sites, you know, other sites related to things that we're doing, and they invariably come back and are worried about what my Wikipedia page says. So do you see how this works? Exactly. Angry Polar Bear has it. Information laundering. So when you talk to the media, they will use that to launder the information that they want to get out about you. And then it will be put on Wikipedia and used against you for literally years. Jacob says, should we boycott Rolling Stone? Well, Rolling Stone refused to run the piece, so I don't think there's any question of that. No, I don't think Stefan is a gatekeeper, not at all. You know, I like Stefan. I got a lot of respect for Stefan. You know, I have a feeling that Stefan doesn't need the flack that comes along with me, but that's fine because, you know, I don't need to do any interviews with anybody. I have no need for it whatsoever. You know, when I go on with Big Bear, that's not really an interview. That's basically us doing what we're doing anyhow. You know, I talk to Big Bear on a regular basis. You know, in fact, we had a 45-minute conversation yesterday about my interpretation of Socrates, actually, my interpretation of Leo Strauss's reading of Plato's Republic. You know, probably would have been pretty interesting on the video, or maybe it would have just been hopelessly esoteric and of no interest to anyone. But that's what we were talking about. You know, and I learned a lot from Big Bear. You know, that whole thing about Ricardo Retardo was really eye-opening for me. You know, here I go through this whole dialectic process, and he can be more effective in persuading people with 2 words. You know, it's very humbling. Let's see. What about debate? Well, that's the whole point about debate. Why bother? You know, if I'm going to debate people these days, it's going to be in writing. Because in writing, the rhetoric is much less effective, and the dialectic level has to be much higher to be persuasive. It was kind of interesting. I went back and read some of the comments about my debate with Bob Murphy. And it was hilarious because Bob Murphy didn't say anything that I didn't know when I was in college. He literally was spitting textbook, you know, economic dogma. The stuff I'm bringing up, you know, is, you know, was genuinely new, some of it. And the other stuff was stuff that the economic dogma has never addressed. You know, the Ian Fletcher critiques. And because of the way that he kept declaring that he had won the debate and was, you know, being very affirmative about the things he was saying, you know, it appears that he probably convinced about, I don't know, somewhere between 30 and 40% of the people that he had won the debate. Meanwhile, there's other commenters that are talking, saying, you know, Murphy said nothing. He didn't answer a single point that Vox raised, Vox destroyed him. So what is the point if 95% of the people are completely unaffected by anything you say? You know, there's no point in it. The only reason to do a debate is when you have somebody who's a complete charlatan and you can demonstrate that. You know, someone like a Ben Shapiro. I would definitely debate Ben Shapiro anytime. because it would effectively de-pants him in front of all of his little fan club. Jordan Peterson, much the same. You know, I can actually follow Jordan Peterson's meandering word fogs, and I can also sum them up, which would make for an interesting debate, because, you know, he would do his little meandering scheme, and then I would interpret that and point out that it didn't actually mean anything, and then I'd ask him a question, and he would say that was a really good question he's never thought about before, and then I would point out that he has run that exact routine approximately 347 times in the last 2 years. You know, I mean, those, if you're just unmasking a charlatan, debates can be useful, but you know, look at my supposed debate with Anglin. Andrew Anglin didn't raise a single point. All he did was whine about me. He didn't have any ability to address any of the facts that I pointed out about how National Socialism preceded the German National Socialists, about how irrelevant most of the points that he had originally tried to make were. Did that change the minds of anyone who was a Stormfront follower? I doubt it. You know, because as Aristotle told us, most people can't change their minds on the basis of information. They only change their minds on the basis of emotional manipulation. And someone like Big Bear is vastly more skilled at persuasion than I am. You know, it's kind of funny. I mean, Scott Adams is not a master persuader, but Donald Trump is, Big Bear is. You know, the people who are best at persuasion, Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton's very good at it. It's almost always people who you tend to think speaks at too low a level. Those tend to be the best persuaders. You know, the more intelligent you are, the more precisely articulate you are, the less persuasive you are. Most people can't follow it. Angry Polar Bear says, talking to the 100 IQs. It's not just talking to the 100 IQs. Remember, 100 IQ is average. And in fact, in the US, the average is probably closer to 95 now. You know, if you take the 2 standard deviation communication gap seriously, I'm not going to be able to convince anybody who's, you know, got below 120 IQ. You know, they're just not going to follow my line of reasoning. Bolt 892 says rhetoric seems to be used for evil most of the time. I don't think so, because I think that you're not grasping the breadth of rhetoric. When you just say God is love and he cares about you, that's rhetoric too. Because even though it's true, it's not designed to appeal to your mind, it's designed to appeal to your heart. You know, so there's plenty of positive rhetoric. We just don't think of it as even being intellectual. We think of it as being, you know, purely emotional, not even addressing the intellectual plane, but it's still rhetoric. It still perfectly meets the definition of rhetoric. Robot Bear says, large fancy words are not necessary and are annoying. But see, that's actually a very mid-witted thing to say. large, fancy words very frequently are necessary because they're the only ones that are precise. You know, and the more languages you know, the more you understand how important that precision is. And I was talking to my son once, and he was actually complaining about the same thing, just saying that, why do you always have to like make up words? Why are you making up words like omnidirigent and apravisten and this and that? And I said, because I have to. It's the same reason that Umberto Eco created celodurismo, because there wasn't a word to express what he wanted to express. I mean, it was kind of funny. I've told this once or twice before, but a long time ago. I'm reading this article by Umberto Eco in Italian, and he uses this word celodurismo. Like, what does this mean? I don't understand. I don't understand what it means, and because I can't understand what it means, I can't understand the sentence. So I go and I look it up in my dictionary. It's not there. So then I go and find the big pink dictionary. I mean, this thing is enormous. It's like literally this big. I mean, and I'm talking about, it's that thick. It's got loads of English words you've never encountered before, and the combination of Italian words that convey that point, because Italian has like about 1/3 the words that English does. It's not in there. So I call up a friend. He's like, I've never heard that word before. That's not even a word. I'm like, no, it definitely is. It's in La Repubblica. And he's like, well, I've never heard it. He's like, read me the sentence. So I read it to him. He's like, I have no idea what it means. So I'm just really frustrated. And so now, if you've been watching me for a while, it probably won't surprise you to know that I spend the next 2 weeks trying to figure this out. When I don't understand something, that irritates me, and so I decide I have to understand this. So anyhow, I'm reading a story about the then Northern League leader. He was one of Matteo Salvini's predecessors back when the La Liga was actually La Liga Nord and was more of like looking for independence from Northern Italy. And this is back around, like, I don't know, 2003 maybe. Anyhow, there was a very sort of negative story about Bossi and about his habit of saying "cielo duro," which basically means I have a hard one, which is implicitly referring to how very strong and masculine he is. And I suddenly realized celodurismo was Umberto Eco's way of referring to a crude, a crude form of machismo, but a very specifically Italian form. And he was using it in a sense that anyone who is sufficiently familiar with Umberto Bossi would recognize. So anyhow, I was very proud of myself for figuring that out. And my friend was totally unappreciative when I called him late at night to tell him that I had figured out what it meant. He's like, why are you calling me? Like, well, I just had to tell you, I figured it out. It's like, okay, what does it mean? I'm like, well, remember Umberto Bossi? He's like, oh my gosh, go to bed. Anyhow, it was funny. But that's why you have to create these words. And my son finally did understand it when at one point he found himself saying, I mean, it's not rhetoric. It's just rhetoric. And then he went, oh, this is why you have to coin new terms. Why you have to create neologisms, because the existing words are bearing too many meanings. So once you have a word that is holding too many meanings, you need to create a new word in order to distinguish it from that previous one. So that was a long digression. Are you a Cylon, and are you programmed to deny it? See, I never watched that Battlestar Galactica, so I'm obviously not a Cylon. I don't have one red eye going ding, 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 right? So I'm not programmed to die. I'm just not a Cylon. Morse Code Bear asks, where do you predict the right will be able to look for leadership in reference to mobilizing against the left? I think it's going to come from outside the establishment. I think that you're going to see some people rise up, possibly out of the military, possibly out of the Generation Z. The boomers are too hopeless. Gen X is too cynical. The millennials are too namby-pamby. It's going to take courage, and it's going to take a certain ruthlessness and relentlessness that I think that we have seen in some of the Generation Z kids. Daniel C. says, people emotionally like winners. So if you can decisively win a debate with dialectics, you can convince people your side is correct. Yeah, that sounds nice, but the problem is that's wrong. That's totally wrong. Because you can't decisively win a debate with dialectics, because no amount of information is capable of convincing those who are limited to the rhetorical. And so that's exactly what Big Bear was talking about when he said, instead of bothering with all the impeccable logic and facts and so forth, you just say Ricardo Retardo, cut to the chase, and win. And Organic Bear says, Vox, when you are elected King of America, will your first act be to require all of your subjects to wear at least one of your books at all times? Only if you're homeless. Because that will be the sign that, somebody should take you in and have a good discussion of Jordanetics with you. Let's see. Is there a Darth Vader in the background? That is a sleeping Ridgeback. In fact, this is Mazee. This is the dog who was very ill, and he's doing much better now. Let me see if I can get him to come over here. Mazee, come here, honey. Come here. Come here. Puppy. Come here. Come here. Oh, there's my boy. There he is. So, he's a good boy. Yeah, he was very ill this winter, some of you may recall, and he's doing much better now. He still has to take some medications and so forth, but we really appreciated all the prayers and the kind wishes and the good thoughts and just the general support that everybody offered, because he's honestly the nicest dog that I've ever met. And and he's a good boy. And so he's just hanging out with me. He doesn't like the thunder. But he's not as physically imposing as he used to be. But he's gained a lot of weight, really much stronger than he used to be. He's able to run around now, play with the other dogs, and so he's really fun to have around. Leapshin Talk says, random request Vox. Could you give me a small topic to talk about in a video? I'll do my best. It'll be unscripted and pretty much on the spot. Anything really, I'll do my best on it. Okay. Do some homework and talk about, let me see here. Okay, talk about whether the reference to forgiving debts in the Lord's Prayer is solely spiritual, or whether it also has a significance with regards to actual monetary debts. That should be an interesting thing for you to tackle. Let's see. Actually, Beer Kife says, he's not a killer. Actually, he would, without question, rip your arm off, and he has the ability to do so. If you were to try to hassle one of his two favorite people. I'll sometimes come in and he'll be sound asleep next to Space Bunny. If I don't make the right kind of noise, like apparently whatever noise indicates that it's me and not somebody else, there's suddenly this really low comes into this huge bark, which of course wakes Space Bunny up and has her all sort of freaked out. And then it's so funny because then he realizes it's me, and then he does his like shameful, please don't yell at me, tail wag. But yeah, he's a really good dog, and he just got hit by this very low probability combination of infections, and fortunately, with good vets and lots of prayers and the right medication and tons of attention from everybody, he pulled through, and he's actually in pretty good shape. It's kind of funny because every time we run into any of the vets or nurses, they all ask about him, because he's everybody's favorite, and so it's it was very satisfying that he came through that okay. Let's see here. Since the Catholic Church is the only organization that has the infrastructure to support change in the U.S. and Europe, what direction do you think they should take? Well, I think they should take the direction that the Dalai Lama is taking. Support the nations. God created the nations. God is not the one pushing this one world, one world under Satan thing. Obviously the current fake pope is not teaching the truth. He obviously has no logos whatsoever, and so hopefully the Catholic Church will be able to purge itself. Of course, the Southern Baptists and the Anglicans and lots of other Christian denominations need to do exactly the same thing. Russell Moore is the cuckiest cuck that ever cucked besides Eric Erickson. I mean, it would be very difficult to decide who is the more obnoxiously cucked Churchian, Russell Moore or Eric Erickson. The problem is Russell Moore is at the head of the Southern Baptist Convention. He should have been thrown out on his ear a long time ago. Talk about wolves in sheep's clothing. Let's see here. Legionnaire Bear says, literally prayed with my daughter for your dog. Well, then I'm happy that you can tell her that that prayers do get answered, and that we really appreciate her doing so. Yeah. Favorite city in Italy? Probably Bergamo. I mean, Venezia is amazing. But just in terms of like a truly interesting little place, I think probably Bergamo. How powerful are the dog's white blood cells now? To the best of my knowledge, they're back to normal now. I mean, he's always going to have some, some issues. You don't go through an experience like that without it leaving some mark on you. But, the vet said there's no reason not to expect him to live a normal life expectancy. I mean, he's probably never going to be the hyper powerful athletic machine that he was. He just doesn't have the muscle. He doesn't have the stamina that he did before. But, just in terms of, I mean, he's still very fast. He's still very strong. His personality is still exactly what it was. Let's see. Vox, I realized one of Jordan B. Peterson's rules about play to get invited is evil. We witness what the establishment right has done to Big Bear. Thank you for decoding. Slow to realize it just now. Good. Well, I'm glad that you see through it now. Hogovich says, Vox, first, I love your streams. Second, did you see on Twitter that Representative Dan Crenshaw said that college debt forgiveness was immoral? Well, first of all, I don't think that we should be looking to gay pirates for our moral standards, especially not one-eyed gay pirates. But he's totally wrong. In fact, I've been reading this and Forgive Them Their Debts, which is literally a history of debts and debt forgiveness dating back to ancient Sumeria and Mesopotamia. And the funny thing is that Crenshaw is saying that in the U.S. Capitol, where they have statues to Hammurabi and at least one, who is the other one here? I was actually just reading that. Hang on. And in fact, here's the interesting thing. Guess who was the first one to come up with the idea that debt forgiveness was not necessary? One guess. Can anyone guess? Okay. Hammurabi, Moses, Lycurgus, and Solon. 4 of the 23 historic lawgivers, all of whom were noted for promulgating debt cancellations. Furthermore, okay, so they talk about how the whole battle throughout history has been, and in fact, one of the big wars, the main reason that there were wars, civil wars in Rome, was because the creditor class was attempting to push through the kind of laws that we have, saying that you couldn't forgive debt. And so Christianity made charitable debt forgiveness the test of one's personal purity of soul. And in fact, Jeremiah interpreted the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar's subsequent defeat of Judea as punishment by the Lord for Zedekiah's going back on his word and violating sacred law. You did not release your people from their debts, so I will release sword, pestilence, and famine. By breaking the Mosaic covenant with the Lord, Zedekiah's behavior condemned the land to destruction at the hands of Babylon. He did evil in the eye of the Lord. So Zedekiah did not follow through. King Zedekiah did not follow through on his promise to cancel the people's debts. Now here's where it really gets interesting. The leading rabbinical school in an age when creditor power was gaining dominance throughout the ancient world, the Pharisees followed the teachings of Hillel. Keep in mind, Hillel is the school that conservatives believe is teaching conservative values. Now credited as a founder of rabbinical Judaism, he sponsored the prosbul clause, in which creditors oblige their clients to waive their rights to have their debts canceled in the Jubilee year. In other words, guess what came out of that? That's where all of these obscene clauses where you are assumed to have signed your rights away in order to use the service, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Indiegogo, that all came from the founder of rabbinical Judaism. And so debt forgiveness is not only moral, it is not only biblical. Debt forgiveness is absolutely necessary if you don't want to have your society completely collapse, because growth and income can never keep up with compound interest. It is a mathematical certainty. Debt always requires more debt, and unless it is periodically forgiven, it will build indefinitely until the entire system collapses and the creditors own everything. That was one of the primary problems that led to the civil wars and the collapse of the Roman Republic. Do baby boomers have actual contempt for their descendants, or are they just short-sighted? I think they have passive contempt for them. I don't think that they have necessarily active dislike. I think that they're just that narcissistic. But I could be wrong. What is Ben Shapiro's position on debt forgiveness? I don't know, but I would be willing to bet that he opposes it completely. I have a non-Christian friend who thinks student debt forgiveness is unconscionable. What are some secular arguments to persuade him he deals in dialectic? Go with the math. First go with the math, then go with the history. I strongly recommend this book by Michael Hudson. I haven't finished it yet. I mean, I'm literally only on page 50 out of 526, but it is excellent. And it is definitely eye-opening. Let's see. Let me make sure I didn't miss any super chats, and I need to get going because I'm going to... Hang on. Cat call. Reading Aquinas. It is a conundrum. Where have we seen ruthlessness in Gen Z? Go talk to them. Let's see here. Is it moral for the government to seize property from people if it serves the greater good, i.e. digging mine that can create many jobs or make a road? I think so, yes. I think it can be. But, that's a very difficult philosophical question, and I think that it has to be resolved on a case-by-case basis. Is it stupid question day yet? No. Monica sent me a praying emoji, I think, so thank you. Christopher says Oregon has must issue CCW. If the police don't intervene, some of those anti-fascists are going to get shot in self-defense. Oh, I totally agree. So, and I believe that does it. So, also I want to say, if you're subscribed to Unauthorized TV, I just want to say thank you. We had the best month we've ever had. We've introduced the new medieval series. Professor Rachel Fulton Brown will have episode 2 up this week. And, it's all going really, really well, thanks to you guys. If you haven't subscribed to Unauthorized yet, I would encourage you to do so. And like I said, we're going to have some very big announcements this week, so look for me to appear on Big Bear's stream and make the announcement, and then we'll discuss it further here on the Darkstream as well. Have a good evening. I'm Vox Day. This is the Darkstream.